My grandson slipped something into my hand during dinner, a note folded tight, hidden beneath his napkin. His parents didn't notice, but I did. And I noticed his hands too. They were shaking so badly he could barely keep hold of his fork. I waited until I was alone to read it. 5 words. Storage Unit 247. Tomorrow morning. I had no idea what he meant, no idea why it mattered. But the look in his eyes told me one thing clearly. If I didn't go, something terrible would happen. So I went. I opened that unit, looked inside, and realized I wasn't there to protect my grandson. I was there to save my own life. Hey there, thanks for tuning in. Before we begin, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling us where you're listening from. We love hearing from you. Quick note before we continue. While this story includes fictional elements for storytelling, the emotions and lessons are very real. Now, let's begin. My son stopped meeting my eyes about 6 months ago. At the time, I didn't understand why. I didn't know he and his wife had plans for me. Dark plans, the kind that make your stomach sink when the truth finally clicks. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in Milwaukee my entire life. I worked as a carpenter, spent 45 years crafting custom furniture for families all across Wisconsin. 5 years ago, I retired, though I still keep a small workshop in my garage. The scent of sawdust and varnish feels like home to me. 3 years ago, my wife Elaine passed away from lung cancer. She was the glue that kept our family together. When she died, something cracked that never quite healed. The house felt too large after that, too quiet. I raised my son Mark in that workshop. From the time he was 7, he'd wander out on Sunday afternoons while I showed him how to measure twice and cut once, how to read the grain of the wood. His first project was a birdhouse, crooked beyond belief, but he was so proud of it. Elaine hung it on the back porch, and for years we watched robins nest there every spring. Those were good days. Mark would work with his tongue sticking out in concentration, and Elaine would bring us lemonade in mason jars. We'd sit together in the sawdust under that warm golden light, just enjoying being a family. Mark is 45 now. He went into real estate development about 20 years ago. For a while, things went well, buying old properties, fixing them up, flipping some, renting others. He married Lauren when he was 28. She's 38 now. From the outside, everything about her seems perfect. Meals always ready, smile always in place, always saying exactly what's expected. They've been married for 17 years and have one son, my grandson Ethan, who's 17. Ethan reminds me so much of Mark at that age. He comes by my workshop whenever he can, learning the basics. The kid's got good hands, patient, careful. But 2 years ago, Mark's business started falling apart. A major development deal collapsed. He tried to salvage it by taking on debt, a lot of debt, $850,000. I didn't know that at the time. All I saw was my son looking worn down, stressed, exhausted. I'd helped him once before, back in 2015, loaned him $50,000 for his first property. He paid back every cent. I'd been proud of him. But 6 months ago, something shifted. Mark stopped visiting as often, and when he did come by, he wouldn't meet my eyes, not the way he used to. His laughter sounded forced. His hugs felt empty. I asked him if everything was okay. He said work was stressful, said he was fine. I believed him because I wanted to, because he was my son, because I trusted him. I wish I'd known then what I know now. I wish I'd understood that sometimes the people you love most are capable of things you'd never imagine. Then came that Tuesday dinner, the one that changed everything. The note came during dessert. Lauren had baked apple pie, her voice cheerful as she chatted about some sale at the mall. Mark sat across from me, pushing his fork through the pie without taking a bite. Ethan was beside me. His hand slipped under the tablecloth and found mine. I felt the paper, small, folded tight. He pressed it into my palm and pulled back quickly. When I glanced at him, his eyes stayed locked on his plate. His hands were trembling. I kept the note hidden, finished my pie, nodded along as Lauren talked. Mark barely spoke, just sat there looking hollow. After dinner, I hugged Ethan a little longer than usual and drove home. In my kitchen, I unfolded the paper. It was Ethan's handwriting. Grandpa, Unit 247, Secure Space Storage, West Side. Combination is 11/15/2007. Please check it before Friday. That date, November 15th, 2007, Ethan's birthday. I didn't sleep that night. What could make my grandson's hands shake like that? And why before Friday? Something in his eyes told me not to call anyone. Just go. Wednesday morning at 9, I drove to the storage facility, a big, impersonal place with long rows of orange metal doors. Unit 247 was on the second floor. I dialed the numbers carefully. The lock clicked open. Inside were 3 cardboard boxes stacked neatly in the corner. I turned on my phone's flashlight and opened the first box. Documents. My will. My life insurance policy. $750,000. Bank statements. The deed to my house. Everything laid out like someone had been studying my life. The second box made my stomach tighten. A small glass bottle with an unfamiliar label. Syringes. Latex gloves. A notebook. Mark's handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere. I taught him cursive when he was 7. Week 1. Small dose. Morning coffee. Monitor for dizziness. Week 2. Gradual increase. Confusion expected. Week 3. Friday morning. Final dose. Should appear as heart attack. Natural causes. My hands began to shake. This was real. This was my son's writing. His plan. The third box contained photographs. Me at the grocery store, at my woodworking guild, standing in my driveway collecting the mail. My schedule, my routine, documented like I was being watched, like I was a target. I dropped down onto the cold concrete floor, the notebook still in my hands. Those familiar loops and slants, the careful way he crossed his letters. My son, the boy I raised, the man I helped build a future, the father of my grandson, had written detailed instructions to end my life. They had plans for me, plans that ended with me gone and $750,000 in their account. The notebook trembled in my grip. I couldn't stop staring at the words. Final dose, heart attack, natural causes, written by the man who'd stopped looking me in the eye 6 months ago because he'd already decided how this would end. Sitting there on that cold floor, I thought about how easy it would be to walk away. Go home, make my morning coffee, let Friday come, let their plan play out. No confrontation, no ugly truth. I'd be gone, and they'd get what they wanted. The thought settled heavily in my chest, tempting in its own terrible way. Memories flooded in. Mark at 12, standing at my workbench with a strip of maple in his hands. I was teaching him dovetail joints, the hardest ones to master. His tongue stuck out in concentration. I guided his hands, felt them tremble with effort. When the pieces finally slid together, tight and perfect, he looked up with that huge grin, like he'd just uncovered a secret of the universe. Then his high school graduation, cap and gown, walking across that stage. Elaine crying beside me, squeezing my hand. Mark waved, shy and proud, and my chest felt ready to burst. 3 years ago at Elaine's funeral, after everyone had gone, Mark came to me. He collapsed into my arms and cried like he was 7 again. We stood there for 20 minutes. I held my son while he sobbed and told him we'd get through it together. That man, that boy I'd raised. Maybe the debt crushed him so completely he couldn't see another way out. Maybe the reason didn't matter anymore. I sat there for 20 minutes, maybe longer, the concrete cold through my jeans, the light overhead buzzing, and stared at those pages while asking myself the hardest question of my life. Did I have the right to stop this? To destroy my son's life by exposing what he'd planned? Then I thought about Ethan. 17 years old, his hands shaking when he slipped me that note, the fear in his eyes at dinner. He'd figured it out somehow, and still found the courage to warn me, knowing it meant going against his own parents. If I let this happen, Ethan would be left alone with them afterward, living with people capable of this, and he'd carry that knowledge, that guilt, that fear. What if they realized he knew? What if they decided he was a problem too? Ethan needed me. More than that, he'd saved me. He'd risked everything to warn me. The least I could do was fight, not just for myself, but for him. I stood up, knees cracking, back aching. I was 68, tired, and heartbroken, but I wasn't finished. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every page of the notebook, every document, every photograph. I backed it all up to the cloud, emailed copies to myself, evidence, proof, the truth in my son's own handwriting. Then I put everything back exactly where it had been, closed the boxes, stacked them the same way, switched off the light, and walked out. I locked the unit behind me. My hands were steady on the drive home. No tears, no shaking, just a cold, clear resolve settling into my bones. I had to protect my grandson, even if it meant sending my own son to prison. Ethan never called, only texted. So when my phone rang at 9 that Wednesday night, I knew it was bad. "Grandpa," his voice cracked. He sounded like a scared kid again. I asked what was wrong. He took a shaky breath. He'd overheard them about a month earlier. Couldn't sleep, came downstairs for water. They were in his dad's office, and his mom was yelling. I gripped the phone and asked what she said. Something about $1.5 million. Mark owed $850,000, and if he didn't fix it, they'd lose everything. Then his dad said my name, and his mom replied, "He's got life insurance, doesn't he?" My blood ran cold. Ethan said after that, Mark started acting strange, wouldn't let him eat anything Lauren cooked, told him to grab food on campus. Ethan followed him one day to the storage place on Oklahoma Avenue. He found Unit 247. He watched Mark punch in Ethan's birthday. After Mark left, Ethan went inside and saw the notebook and the boxes. For 2 weeks, Ethan had been making his own food, eating at school, pretending everything was normal. He was crying now, didn't know what to do, couldn't tell anyone. "He's my dad," he said, "but you're my grandpa." I told him he did the right thing. My voice stayed steady, even if my hands didn't. I told him he was the bravest kid I knew. He asked what to do. I told him to stay in his room that night and not eat or drink anything they gave him. He agreed. I told him I was proud of him. After we hung up, I sat alone in my kitchen for a long minute, then dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Vincent Porter. "Vince, it's Harold. I need your help." At 10:30, I slid into a booth at George Webb on South 27th. The diner was half empty, fluorescent lights buzzing. Vincent was already there with black coffee. 67, retired MPD detective, my best friend for 40 years. He stood when he saw me and said I sounded rattled. I sat down, pulled out my phone, and slid it across the table. He scrolled through the photos from the storage unit. His face didn't change much. Cops rarely show it. But his jaw tightened. "Your son," he said quietly. I nodded. "And his wife." Vincent set the phone down and asked if I had a plan. I told him I needed wireless cameras. 3 of them. He said he knew a guy. I said I also needed someone active duty who could move fast once we had evidence. He named Melissa Brooks from Homicide, said she was solid, and promised to call her. I told him I needed access to their house. Vincent looked at me hard and asked if I was sure. I said I was. He pulled a pen and scribbled on a napkin. I was to call Mark in the morning, say I was worried and wanted to stay a few days, play the concerned father. Mark would believe it. He was desperate. Thursday night, we'd plant the cameras and record everything. Friday morning, we'd call Melissa and move. I stared at the napkin. 3 locations: kitchen, hallway, office. Vincent asked if I was ready. I thought of Ethan's shaking hands, of Elaine's grave, of my son's handwriting. I said yes. Thursday morning, I dialed my son, the son who wanted me dead. I kept my voice steady and told him I was worried and might stay a few days. There was silence, then Lauren's muffled voice in the background. Mark came back on and said it would be good. 4 o'clock? Perfect. I hung up and stared at my phone. The man I taught to build birdhouses, now planning to end my life. I packed an overnight bag. The house on South Kinnickinnick was a craftsman with a wide porch. I'd helped Mark buy it 12 years earlier. Now it felt like enemy ground. Lauren opened the door. Blonde ponytail, cream sweater, perfect smile. She hugged me and said it was good to see me. Mark was in the living room. Ethan was upstairs, not feeling well. I knew better. Mark sat slumped on the couch, dark circles under his eyes. When he stood, his hands shook. Dinner felt unreal. Lauren served pot roast with carrots and mashed potatoes. Everything just right. She smiled and laughed and asked about my woodworking. Mark barely spoke, pushing food around his plate. Ethan sat pale and quiet across from me, his fork scraping the plate. "Family is everything," Lauren said, squeezing Mark's hand. "We're so lucky." I looked at her, really looked, and saw nothing behind those blue eyes. No guilt, no fear, just calculation. I agreed. Family is everything. Ethan met my eyes, and I gave the smallest nod. Mark excused himself early, exhausted. Lauren followed, touching my shoulder, telling me the guest room was ready. I waited. At 11, the house was silent. Ethan appeared with a small backpack. Inside were 3 wireless cameras, each no bigger than a smoke detector. Vincent came through. We moved through the house like shadows. Kitchen first. I climbed onto a chair and tucked the camera above the refrigerator, angled toward the counter and coffee maker. Ethan watched the stairs. Hallway next, mounted high, facing the bedrooms and the office. Then the office. I slipped inside and placed the camera on the bookshelf behind a row of binders, giving a clear view of the desk. Back in the guest room, I opened my laptop. 3 live feeds glowed on the screen. Kitchen, hallway, office, all recording. Ethan sat beside me, his shoulder pressed against mine. He whispered that he was scared but not leaving. I put my arm around him and told him we had this. We sat in the dark, watching the empty hallway, waiting. The bedroom door opened. Lauren stepped out, moving quietly in a thin robe. She glanced back once to be sure Mark was asleep, then headed downstairs. On the screen, I watched her enter the kitchen and go straight to the cabinet above the sink. The camera caught her moving through the darkness with practiced ease. She opened the cabinet, took out a small bottle filled with clear liquid, unscrewed the cap, and poured it into the coffee grounds container. She stirred with a spoon, sealed it, and put it back exactly where it belonged. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, glanced around once, then went back upstairs. Beside me, Ethan's breathing turned shallow. I whispered that I knew. The office feed flickered. Mark stepped into frame and sat at his desk. He opened the notebook, the same one I'd seen in the storage unit. His pen hovered, then he wrote slowly and deliberately. Friday. Final dose. He set the pen down and dropped his head into his hands, his shoulders shaking. I couldn't look away. Lauren appeared in the doorway and asked if it was ready. Mark didn't look up. He said it would be done tomorrow. She reminded him of the $850,000. For Ethan's future, for their future. He said nothing. She turned and left. Ethan was crying silently beside me, tears streaming down his face. I put my hand on his shoulder, but my throat had closed. I saved every file, uploaded everything to the cloud, copied it to a USB drive, and emailed it all to Vincent with the subject line, Evidence. I saved it again and again. I wasn't taking chances. Before dawn, the house was still. I slipped downstairs as quietly as Lauren had. In the kitchen, I found the coffee container, poured the contaminated grounds into a sealed bag, and tucked it into my jacket. Then I opened a fresh container I'd brought from home and filled the coffee maker. As the sky lightened, the pot began to brew. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. Lauren came downstairs, robe on, hair pulled back. She stopped short when she saw me. I told her I couldn't sleep. Her eyes flicked to the coffee pot, fresh and full. Her smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. I offered her a cup. She declined, said she'd wait for Mark, and left the kitchen quickly. Mark shuffled in later, eyes bloodshot, face pale. He looked at me, then at the coffee, then back at me. He knew. He said my name. I greeted him and took a sip. He stood frozen, hands trembling, mouth opening with no words coming out. Finally, he turned and walked away. My phone buzzed with a message from Ethan saying he was staying upstairs and watching from the window. I told him to stay put. Soon after, I heard tires crunch on gravel. I went to the front window. 3 unmarked police cars pulled into the driveway. Melissa Brooks stepped out of the first, flanked by uniformed officers. Vincent got out of the second, his face set. I set my coffee cup down. Behind me, Lauren's voice cut through the room, sharp with confusion, asking Mark who was outside. I turned to see Mark at the bottom of the stairs, staring at me, his face drained of color. He whispered my name and asked what I'd done. The doorbell rang. Melissa Brooks stood on the porch with a warrant, badge visible, officers beside her. Lauren appeared at the top of the stairs, eyes wide, asking what this was about. I opened my laptop and played the footage. Lauren in the kitchen, pouring the clear liquid into the coffee container. Mark in the office, writing final dose, their conversation about the money and Ethan's future. Melissa watched over my shoulder, her expression hard. An officer moved into the kitchen and returned moments later holding the sealed bag of contaminated coffee grounds. Another produced the notebook from the office desk drawer. Mark collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. Melissa stepped forward and read the charges. Conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Mark looked up, tears pouring down his face, begging me to tell him why. He shouted that the business had failed, that he owed $850,000, that the bank was about to take everything. His voice broke as he apologized and asked for forgiveness. I stared at the man I'd raised, the boy I'd taught to work with his hands, and told him he could have asked me for help. He said he couldn't face me again. Lauren came down the stairs slowly, her face cold. She said I was old anyway, that we only had so many years left, and they needed the money now. She accused me of destroying the family. I told her I'd saved my life and my grandson's. The officer cuffed her wrists. She didn't flinch. Mark kept crying, saying he had no other choice, begging me to understand. I told him I loved him, tears finally running down my face, but I couldn't let him end my life. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Ethan ran across the room and threw his arms around me, burying his face in my shoulder. I held him tight and felt him shaking. Mark saw his son standing with me and broke completely, whispering apologies. Ethan didn't look at him. He just held on. The officers led Mark and Lauren outside to separate cars. Mark's hands were cuffed, his shoulders slumped. Lauren walked with her head high, no emotion on her face. At the car, Mark turned back and our eyes met, his full of regret, mine full of tears. I didn't look away. I'd made my choice. The police cars pulled away one by one. I stood on the porch with Ethan's arms still wrapped around me and watched them disappear. Vincent came over and rested a hand on my shoulder, telling me I'd done the right thing. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure there was a right thing anymore. I only knew I'd chosen life, and I'd chosen Ethan. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with me. Leave a comment, anything at all, just so I know you're still here. One quick note before we continue. What follows includes fictionalized elements. The trial, certain conversations, some details were shaped for storytelling. The emotions, the choices, the lessons, those are real. If this is where you want to stop, I understand. But if you want to know how Ethan and I rebuilt our lives, keep listening. 10 months later, I sat in a courtroom and watched my son receive a 25-year sentence. The trial had stretched on for 8 months. Mark's attorney argued diminished capacity, financial desperation, mental collapse. But the evidence was overwhelming. The footage, the notebook, the contaminated coffee grounds. Mark confessed to everything. The Walker's Point project that collapsed when financing fell through, the $850,000 in debt, the sleepless nights, the panic, the pressure. Lauren sat beside him in an orange jumpsuit, her face unreadable, whispering to him night after night. Mark said it began as a dark joke, a way to vent frustration. Then she started planning it, and he didn't stop her. Then he was planning it too. Lauren never showed remorse. Even as the judge read her sentence, 25 years, the same as Mark's, she stared straight ahead. Ethan sat beside me in the gallery, gripping my hand. When it was over, we walked out into the Milwaukee winter and didn't look back. Ethan turned 18 3 weeks after sentencing. He had already been accepted to Milwaukee Area Technical College for criminal justice. He said he wanted to understand what had happened, to make sure it never happened to anyone else. He moved in with me permanently. We sold Mark's house to cover part of the debt. The rest would follow him for years, but we'd manage. Most evenings, Ethan and I worked together in the shop. He'd gotten good, really good. He was building a rocking chair now, using advanced dovetail joints I'd shown him the month before. His hands moved with the same steady confidence Elaine used to have when she quilted. We visited Mark once, just once. He sat across from us in the visitation room, thinner, older, eyes hollow. He said he understood, looking at Ethan, that we'd never come back. Ethan nodded and didn't say a word. We left and never returned. It's autumn now. Golden light filters through the shop windows, dust motes floating in the air. Ethan stands at the workbench, sanding the curved arm of the rocking chair, brow furrowed in concentration. I sit in the old chair by the window, drinking coffee. Real coffee. No ghosts in it anymore. I tell him his grandmother would be proud. He looks up and smiles. She always said he had her hands, steady, patient. He sets down the sandpaper, wipes his palms on his jeans, and thanks me for choosing him. The tightness returns to my throat, the same one I've carried for 10 months. I tell him he chose the truth. That's what mattered. He nods and goes back to work. I think about Elaine and what she'd say if she were here. I think she'd understand. I lost my son, but I saved my grandson, and for her, I know that would have been enough. The shop smells like sawdust and coffee. Ethan hums quietly as he works, the way Elaine used to hum when she was happy. Outside, the leaves are turning. The world keeps moving, and we keep building. Something new. Scarred, but honest. People sometimes ask if I did the right thing, turning in my own son. I don't have a simple answer. I've asked myself 1,000 times if I could have prevented it, if I'd noticed sooner, asked harder questions, pushed when Mark stopped looking me in the eye 6 months before. But Mark made his choice. He chose $850,000 over my life, over his son's future, over everything Elaine and I taught him. Elaine's last words to me in that hospital room 3 years ago were, "Take care of the boys." I saved one of them. That has to be enough. I've learned some lessons, though. Things I wish I'd recognized sooner. First, trust your instincts. When someone you love stops looking you in the eye, there's always a reason. When your gut warns you, listen. Your body knows before your mind does. Second, listen to young people. Ethan saved my life. A 17-year-old had more courage than I almost did. He saw the truth and didn't look away. We often think we need to protect the young, but sometimes they're the ones protecting us. Third, no amount of money is worth your soul. $850,000. That's what Mark thought I was worth. Dead, I was worth that. Alive, I was in the way. Money doesn't care about you. It doesn't love you, and it's never worth destroying your family. Fourth, family is a choice, not just blood. Loyalty matters more than DNA. Ethan chose truth over his father. I chose Ethan over Mark. Family is who you fight for, who you protect, not just who shares your last name. Fifth, love means protection. Sometimes love isn't soft. Sometimes love is stopping someone you care about from becoming a killer. It's saying no, drawing a line, protecting even when it hurts. Enabling isn't love. Protecting, even when it breaks your heart, is. Do I regret it? I regret that my son became someone who needed to be stopped. I don't regret stopping him. There's a difference. Ethan is building a life on truth now. No lies, no shortcuts, no desperation. Truth. Every Sunday, I put flowers on Elaine's grave. I tell her about Ethan, the rocking chair he finished, his classes at MATS, how he hums while he works just like she did. I think she'd understand. I think she'd forgive the part of me that still aches when I remember Mark in that orange jumpsuit, looking back at me through the police car window. Tomorrow, I'll wake up. Ethan will leave a note on the counter. Gone to class, back at 3 now. Love you, Grandpa. I'll make coffee, head to the shop, and that will be enough. I chose to fight. I chose life. I didn't just turn in my son. I stopped a murder and gave my grandson the chance to become a better man than his father. That isn't betrayal. That's love. So that's my true story. One of those grandpa stories nobody wants to live through, but I hope you'll learn from it. Here's what I want you to take away. Don't wait until you're holding evidence of a loved one's betrayal before acting. Trust your instincts early. Ask hard questions when someone stops looking you in the eye. Investigate when finances don't add up. Believe a grandchild who whispers fear. God gives us instincts for a reason. He gave Ethan the courage to hand me that note, and he gave me the strength to choose life over loyalty to a son who chose greed over love. This isn't just another grandpa story for entertainment. It's a warning. Financial abuse happens in families. Emotional manipulation destroys from within. Sometimes the people we trust most are plotting our undoing. God puts truth tellers in our path, like Ethan, if we're willing to see.